everybody. Thank you ever so much for attending the second of our 5 Teacher and Advisor CPD webinars. This one is on the topic of higher education student finance, and we're delighted to have Stephen from Student Finance England, who's going to be delivering the session today. What we're going to be doing today is we're going to be recording the webinar so we can turn it into a resource that we're going to put on the website as well. So obviously anyone that doesn't want to appear on the recording, just please make sure that you've got your camera off and your mic muted. If you've got any questions during the session, please feel free to pop them in the chat box, which we'll be reviewing, and then we will pose those questions to Stephen at the end of the session, if that's okay. Wonderful. Thanks ever so much. Over to you, Stephen.
Brilliant. Thank you. Good evening, everybody, and thank you very much for inviting me along this evening. My name is Stephen Jones. I work for Student Finance England, and my job really is to run sessions like this, so share with you some information, advice and guidance around the products and services that we offer. So what I'm going to do is give you an overview this evening, and then be in a position to take any questions that you might have at the end of the session. I will be sharing the slides with Alexander and the team at university, and they'll be able to pass those on to you, because there'll be some links in there that you may find useful and you may want to share with student body, etc. Okay, so what we're going to look at this evening is that what's available. Unfortunately, we haven't had the information through from Department of Education yet to confirm the funding levels for academic year 24-25. So we're relying on the information for the current academic year 23-24, but what that will do is give you a flavour of the quantum or the amounts of funding that's available for your students. We'll also look at repayment, support for independent students, and we'll also look at cost of living considerations and budgeting, which is going to be a big part of student journey. I think the economic outlook still looks very similar to last year, where we know that students are going to find the economic outlook challenging. So we are encouraging students to plan a little bit more probably than they have done in the past, to make sure that they get the very best out of their experience of university. Let's have a look at what's available. So I suppose before we get into the numbers, it's important to think about eligibility for funding. If I deliver a session to parents or students, I will always get asked about 2 areas of student finance most often. One is, am I eligible for funding? And the second one is disabled student allowance, which we'll come to later. Because Student Loans Company is a not-for-profit organisation that's run by its shareholders, Department of Education, the Welsh Government, Scottish Government and Northern Ireland Assembly, we're spending taxpayers' money, and what that means is there's some rules and regulations that we need to work to around eligibility. So for our students to become eligible for funding, we need them to have settled status in the UK. So that means that they can live in the UK without any Home Office restriction. So for students who've come from Europe, we're looking for that settled status, or they have indefinite leave to remain. A temporary leave to remain means that not impossible for them to achieve funding, but I would encourage you, if you have students like that where parents may be on work visas, etc., to look at the link below to the gov.uk site, Student Finance, who qualifies. That'll give you more information there. We do need students to be ordinary resident in the UK on the first day of the first academic year of their course, and we need them to have been living in the UK for 3 years immediately prior to this date. That's for UK home and rest of the world students. That does differ for students who are here under one of the humanitarian protection schemes that we have, for example, refugee status, stateless, or most recently you would have potentially come across students who've fled Ukraine because of the conflict there and are here under one of the Ukraine schemes. For those students, they don't need that 3 years ordinary residence in the UK. They become eligible for support from Student Finance England as soon as that status is awarded to them. The key difference there is, unfortunately, asylum seekers aren't eligible for student finance until they're awarded that refugee or humanitarian protection status. Moving on now to the funding that's available to our students. So the maximum tuition fee for a full-time course that a university can charge a student in the UK is £9,250 a year. That tuition fee has been frozen now for 6 years, and we do know that that will be frozen until the end of 24-25, at the end of this current Parliament. So we provide a tuition fee loan that covers the tuition fee support for the student. Now, the beauty of the tuition fee loan is that we pay that directly to the university on the student's behalf. So none of that money is awarded directly to the student, and then they need to pay the student, pay the university. It's quite a simple product for the student to apply for as well. So when they log on to apply for student finance, we will ask them if they want to apply for the tuition fee loan, and it'll ask them whether they want the maximum amount or to specify a different amount of money. It's not means tested, this product, so it's not based on household income. So it's quite a simple product for the student to be awarded, and once you've established eligibility, confirmation of that is relatively straightforward, as I mentioned. We also offer the maintenance loan. So this is to support students with living costs while they're at university. So the figure below there you can see is for our full-time students. The amount that they are entitled to receive depends upon where they're living while they're studying. So you can see there the difference between parental home elsewhere. So I'm deciding I'm going to live in Halls. London rate is slightly higher because of the cost of living in the capital, and the overseas rate there as well when we have students on placement. I've also included the entitled to benefits rate there. This is predominantly used by students who are dependent child, and the reason why it's different is students who are on benefit or universal credit and maintenance loan do a very similar thing. So as the maintenance loan is awarded, so the amount of universal credit the student will receive reduces. The difference between those two figures is ring fenced to help students and support them with their studies. So the maintenance loan is means tested against household income. So you can see there now that what we've done is we've split it into the non-income assessed and income assessed element. All eligible students will receive that non-income assessed element. The income assessed element, as I said before, is based on household income. Now, for the majority of 17 to 19-year-olds or school age applicants, that will be parents or mum and boyfriend or father and boyfriend, or it's whoever's responsible for them at that household income. And that's where we would, during the application process, ask for some financial information from the student sponsors. This table here gives you an idea of the impact on household income has on the amount of funding that students receive. Now, we do have a student finance calculator on our website that parents and students can access, and that will give them a really good idea of how much maintenance support they're likely to receive from Student Finance England. And that is their first step, if you like, to that financial planning for their journey into higher education. As you can see there, the emboldened letters there, numbers, sorry, that's where the amount of support that the student will receive from Student Finance England is only equal to the non-means tested element of support. The other thing to talk about when we're looking at household income is the impact of a change in household income. So most recently, I suppose, we've come through COVID and the lockdowns that we had, and obviously a number of parents or sponsors were furloughed, so they were earning less than they anticipated in that year. The people were made redundant, people lost their jobs, people took lower paid jobs, and I think the term was quietly retiring at the time, which would be lovely, by the way. But we do see through the academic year a change in household earnings. So what we can do, if the household income drops by 15% or more, we can reassess that household income at any point during the academic year. And that could well mean that the student receives more maintenance funding based on the new earning level. And that can happen more than once during that year. It just needs to drop by 15% or more for us to be able to action the reassessment. So let's look at the additional support that's available for students. So on top of the tuition fee and maintenance loan, we do offer some grants for students who have care and responsibilities. So you can see there, there's funding for students who are adults dependent upon them. We have the Parents Learning Allowance, which is additional funding to help students who are also parents. And this is designed to help them with everyday costs of study, such as books, study materials, and travel. And then we have the childcare grant as well. And if you have dependent children and you're thinking about entering higher education, then knowing how much childcare is available to you through that academic year is really important. Childcare is quite expensive. I remember when my two kids were both in full-time childcare, and it's certainly something that you would want to know about before you embarked on the journey. And the beauty with student finance is once you've applied for your finance, and we have sent you the notification of entitlement letter confirming the funding that you were able to access, and you've completed the application for childcare grant, we can tell you exactly how much funding you'll have for the academic year. And we now pay the childcare provider directly, which means again that we're not asking students to hold this kind of money in their account when we know that there are other financial pressures that sometimes meant students in the past, when we did pay the money directly to the student, meant that that money was absorbed into other costs of living. Grants for dependents are means tested, and you can see here we have the upper and lower thresholds for how much typically with these kind of awards it would be student's partner, but not always, that would be taken into account, and you can see the maximum and minimum amounts of support that the students can receive. So it's always one just to cover there with the grants for dependents, that those figures are means tested. So the figures we saw on the previous screen were the maximums. I want to now just talk about disabled student allowance. Now, way back in March 2022, Lord Holmes published a report into disabled student allowance, and it makes really interesting reading, but probably not for the right reasons. What in essence, what Lord Holmes identified was DSA, or disabled student allowance, is only received by 29% of those in higher education declaring a disability. So that's an incredible number of students that are going to higher university that didn't know about disabled student allowance being available, or didn't think it applied to their condition, or didn't access it at all. The more distressing thing is when you see the progression rate from students who are moving into higher education who have a special education needs or have the education health and care plan, and you can see those numbers are even lower. And the real, I suppose, the most distressing part of this is we don't know how many students were discouraged from attending higher education in the first place, or who entered higher education but didn't declare their disability. So we know we've got a lot of work to do in this field, where students at school or college who are getting some help for a condition or a disability, who are going to university, who aren't going to access the help and support they need, particularly within those first couple of terms, where everything changes. You go from a sixth form or college environment to university, which could be a new city, or could be a campus-based university or a city-based university where the buildings are scattered across a wide area. You've got to make new friends. You've got to settle into new halls, a new way of living. The way that you're taught is different to at school and college. And to make all those adaptations when you're an able-bodied student is challenging enough. But couple that with a disability, and you realise that the support the support needs to be there for these students to make sure that they enjoy their stay at university and get the very, very best out of it. So we know that when students apply for student finance, they don't always declare that they have a disability. We also know through UCAS, students don't declare that they have a disability on their application. And I suppose, like most of us, they think that that may put them at a disadvantage of being offered a place at university. Where the truth is, the universities would love to know that a student has a disability, not to make a decision on offer or conditional offer, but so they can reach out to the student before they come and talk to them about what additional help and support they might need. Student Finance England provides products and services to support disabled students, but all of the universities in the area do exactly the same. And their disability advisors and the disability team at all of the universities are really looking to help and support those students as they enter higher education. So the maximum allowance for disabled student allowance is 26,291, or was for the last academic year 23-24. And that's applicable to full-time, part-time, undergraduate and postgraduate students. Disabled student allowance is there to level the playing field for students who've got a disability, a long-term health condition, mental health condition, or specific learning difficulty like dyslexia or dyscalculia. The really good thing about DSA is it's available in addition to all of the other funding that we offer. It doesn't need to be repaid, and it's not means tested. And we really do look at the student's individual needs when we're awarding support. So this slide here just gives you an idea of some of the conditions that are covered by disabled student allowance. It's not a full list. It just gives you an idea in sort of different sections, what kind of things we commonly see with students. It would come as no surprise to any of you that students with mental health conditions has probably been where we've seen the most growth in the last couple of years. I think certainly lockdowns and progressing through education through COVID was challenging as a parent, as a teacher, and as a student. And I can certainly speak from my two children that they did see a deterioration in their mental health during those periods. And we are living with that now. I'm sure universities and schools are also better at spotting these conditions and offering help. So that's probably the most one of the most common areas we see people applying for disabled student allowance, as well as specific learning differences, as I mentioned before, like dyslexia. Again, we're getting much better at picking these learning difficulties up through school and early years to higher education. When we're looking at some of the other autistic spectrum disorders, it's worth noting, because we know, for example, like with ADHD, the diagnosis time for that is long, takes a long time. We can work with a working diagnosis of one of the autistic spectrum disorders, and that means that the students can access the support that they need. Like with all of the products that we're going to talk about this evening, I would always recommend students apply as soon as they can for student finance. And we tend to open towards the end of February, early March. If students or yourselves follow us on X or Facebook, we'll be able to notify you that we've opened and we've launched a service. We don't need a confirmed offer, or all we need from students is their first choice of where they want to go to university. It's particularly important for disabled student allowance is because there's a couple of stages to the application process there where we request medical evidence. We'll ask the students to attend a needs assessment, an independent needs assessment, and then based on that report, we'll reallocate the support and equipment that's recommended to the student, and that can take up to 100 working days for that process to complete. So the earlier students apply for this, the more likely they're going to have that support in place for term one. And I think term one is a real good measuring stick for students who haven't got the support in place. Trying to get students to go back after the Christmas break is difficult anyway. If you've had to work through the first semester without the support that you thought you would need, or the support that you've had previously at school or college, it becomes even more challenging. So it's something to talk to your students about and encourage them to make that application as soon as they can. We also provide funding for students moving on from their undergraduate studies. So we provide postgraduate master's loan, postgraduate doctoral loan. It's worth pointing out here that PGCE, if you have students who are looking to go into teaching, that is funded at undergraduate using the undergraduate package, although it describes as postgraduate, the funding package is undergraduate. So students moving into teaching will follow that funding package. For students who are thinking of taking on nursing or other allied healthcare professional courses, and you can see them highlighted here, the NHS does offer a training grant in England, and that's £5,000 per academic year for all eligible students. There's an additional £1,000 for specialist subjects. They also offer some additional childcare support. And most importantly, is they offer a reimbursement of travel and temporary accommodation costs when attending placements. So typically, although most universities will try and place students as close to them as they can, there will be times when students will have to travel more than they probably expected to. Having their travel or dual accommodation reimbursed is really important, particularly when we're looking at budgeting and when we're looking at the amount of maintenance support we're going to receive from Student Finance England. And that £5,000 training grant comes in really handy. Typically, nursing degrees are longer each academic year than a standard degree. So what that does is that precludes student nurses, etc., from taking on some of the part-time work that other students would do while they were at university. Students will apply to the NHS directly for this funding. They usually open slightly later than us in April. And one of the pieces of eligibility evidence that they will want to see is the letter that we send students confirming they're eligible for tuition fee and maintenance loan. So the sooner students apply for funding from ourselves, then they can move on and apply for this funding as well. As I mentioned before, a standard course at university is, well, on average 30 weeks and 3 days per academic year. Lots of nursing courses go on longer than that, and sometimes it's a full 52 weeks, including placements. So we offer a long course loan, which is available to means tested students based on the number of additional weeks that they will complete during their nursing degree. They don't need to apply for this. Our system picks this up from the course information that universities upload, so that they will have the maintenance loan to cover the time that they will spend studying, including placement. So I'm just going to move on to repayments now. So some of you will have remembered last year that there were some changes made to student finance by the UK government. One of the big changes was to repayment. The repayment threshold for students who entered higher education in September 2023, moving forward, is set at £25,000 and will be frozen at that level until 2027. It will rise with retail price index. What we have removed is the interest that we used to charge to the loan. So it used to be 3% plus RPI that was charged to students from when that first payment was released to the student. Now it will only rise with RPI. Students will only start repaying from the April after they complete or leave their course. And I suppose the best example to show here is a 2026 graduate who starts a job with £28,000 a year, which is around the UK average for graduate entry now. We'll be looking at a repayment level of £17 over the financial year 27-28. If a student's income drops below that threshold, their repayments will stop. If they never earn over that threshold, they'll never make a payment. Any outstanding balance will be written off after 40 years after entering repayment. That's quite an important note there. It's the repayment of student finance is only based on your affordability to do so. So it's based on your earnings rather than the capital amount that's borrowed, and that's different to a mortgage or car loan or a credit card. And the fact that the repayments stop if your income drops below that threshold, there are very few, I can't think of any, to be honest, financial products that behave like that in the marketplace. Some of the questions we get asked about repayment is, if I've got a poor credit rating, can I still get a student loan? And the answer is yes, because we don't work with any credit agencies. Similar thing is true if you're in trouble financially with your student finance repayments. That won't affect your ability to obtain other credit. Another question is around mortgages. So will my student loan prevent me from getting a mortgage? And I think that comes from people my age looking at that balloon amount, the total amount borrowed. The thing is that the mortgage market changed a few years ago now. Before I joined Student Loans Company, I had the privilege of working for a large bank. And although I did commercial lending, I did have to complete my mortgage exams. And what the mortgage advisor now needs to do is to justify the recommendation for borrowing based over the term of the loan, looking at affordability. So the student loan repayment, the monthly amount, is as important as your council tax or your electric bill, your car loan payment, credit card payment, anything like that. So what they're doing is they're looking at how much income is coming in and how much is being paid out on a monthly basis. And they're looking for a piece of pie big enough to cover the mortgage repayment. And that's what they base their recommendation on. And the simple fact that if you lose your job, the fact is we don't call on that capital amount where other lenders would. So it shouldn't affect the affordability for a mortgage any differently to anything else that you spend monthly on. It's just that monthly amount that they would be interested in. So this gives you an example of how your gross annual income increases through your working life, the amount that you're likely to repay for your student loan. The 25,710 figure is what Department of Education have forecast the RPI impact to have on the threshold level, and those are the figures that you can see there. I just want now to quickly touch on independent students and the support available for them. So UCAS has got a great section on student finance and independent students and the supports available to them. There's loads of great reading there. So to be classed as independent, the student needs to be age 25 or over on the first day of the academic year or meet one of the other criteria. Typically, most commonly you'll see is students who have care of a person under 18, or more often students who are presenting as estranged from their parents or have been looked after by the local authority as a care leaver. So for students who are estranged or are a care leaver, there is no means testing of their maintenance, and they will receive that maximum amount of support. And I've popped in a couple of links there to Propel and Standalone. Standalone's website is really useful. They've got a whole section on that higher education journey. It's really accessible. I had the privilege of meeting one of the authors of that pack, and it's lived experience, so it's really helpful and useful. Propel is a great website as well, particularly for students who are care leavers. It can put them in touch with a key contact at a university who's able to talk to them about what support they can likely receive from the university as a care leaver, and also can advise them on things like the statutory care that the local council will still need to provide. Across the whole of the Northwest, I know that all of universities take provision of care for care leavers very, very seriously. There's a lot of charities doing a lot of great work in this area as well. We still find ourselves with that staggering statistic that more care leavers will go to prison than go to higher education. So we know we've got a lot of work still to do there to encourage these great kids to go to university and achieve everything that they can. As I mentioned before, Standalone, really good links And if you have any queries or you're supporting a student who is estranged there or as a care leaver, our independent inquiries email address is really useful. There's a direct line to our estrangement assessors at Darlington now as well. There is a form as professionals in the education sector that you can complete on the student's behalf to support their application for estrangement. That's a real step forward, and it means that you can use your own experience to support the student to get the maximum amount of support they'll receive, not just from ourselves, but once they are confirmed as independent, that makes or will help them to become eligible for scholarships and bursaries at universities as well. So it's a really useful tool to have in your kit bag, if you like, to support these vulnerable students. And again, I mentioned some of the other charities. That the list isn't exhaustive. There's just a few there that I think have got some really useful insights for students and for yourselves as well. So let's now look at cost of living considerations. So there is some guidance on gov.uk that's been designed to help students consider a range of living costs they may face and understanding the funding they can access. This student space is a really good resource as well, and within that area there's also budget planners and things that can help the student to plan their finances. Most big banks, most high street banks, will also have student budgeting hints and tips on their websites. And Martin Lewis has got a great section on it as well. So there's lots of resources out there to help support students understand how to budget and some of the pitfalls maybe to avoid as well. Now, savethestudent.org is another good resource, and every year they complete a student money survey, which they go out to students across the UK and really ask them what they're spending their money on. And as you can see there, rent is the biggest slice of the pie, and I suppose always was and always will be. The thing to remember, I suppose, is that there is a range of rental accommodation available in most cities, and if your students are anything like my daughter, they will want to go to the fanciest accommodation with the red velvet sofa in the room and the games room that runs the entire length of the building on the ground floor. But that's not always the affordable way forward, and it's really important for students and sponsors to start budgeting and planning. One of the hints I would give parents and sponsors at the time is as far as groceries are concerned, is send your child to school, at a university, able to cook a few meals. My daughter is an excellent baker, but she really can't cook. And if she was sat next to me, she'd tell you the same. So that meant she was rebuying food because she'd either burnt it or undercooked it. And it's about smart planning meals, the kind of thing that we do on a day-to-day or week-to-week basis. And going out, also consider the fact that these days everything's on your card. So back in my day, it was easy to budget when you went out because when you ran out of money in your pocket, it was time to go home. But these days, it's just everything is just a tap of the card away. So it's also understanding how often you're going to go out, how much you're going to spend. But if you do overspend, how do you correct that? One of the big costs we see at the moment with students is takeaways and eating out. They're marketed to now more than ever, and those costs have gone up a lot over the last few years. But also consider the cost of things like a Starbucks or a Costa versus buying yourself a thermal mug, a jar of coffee, and boiling the kettle before you leave. There's lots of ways to save money, and I suppose that's the way I'm looking at this. And I'm sure within your schools, you're running sessions like this for your sixth formers or students likely to go to university about being smart with their money. From the survey as well, it showed that 66% of students saved some money before they went to university. It was an average of £1,280. And as we all know, in the real world, that doesn't go a long way. Perhaps if you've filled up your car with petrol, or you've done a couple of weekly shops or paid your electric bill, where there's not a lot left there, is there? 15% of students went to university and never budgeted. And that terrifies me a little bit. One, because they're not going to they're not going to enjoy university as they should. They're going to run out of money. The potential threat of running out of money and withdrawing is it can affect the funding that Student Finance England can give them in the future. So when we look to fund students' applications for finance, we use a funding formula looking at previous study. That is, we'll fund the course duration, whether that's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years, and we give every student a gift year, a +1, a just in case year. So if I go to university in September and by the end of November I've run out of money and I withdraw, that's 1 year gone. That's my gift year, my just in case year gone. So when I re-engage next year with higher education, I've still got the course duration covered for tuition fee. So that's fine. If I fail one of those years and need to repeat, that's when the problem comes, because I don't have the course duration now. I've got to fund the next academic year I go to university, and that could be up to £9,250. This doesn't affect maintenance support, grants for dependents, or DSA. It does affect the tuition fee, which at 9,250, I'm sure you'll all agree, is a lot of money. Now, if a student leaves because it isn't their fault, maybe a bereavement, family illness, maybe they were ill themselves, then that's fine. We can add that year back in through compelling personal reasons. But running out of money isn't a compelling personal reason. So that's why I suppose I talk about budgeting and saving and really planning to get the very, very best out of going to university. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's everything from me this evening. I'm going to stop sharing my slides now, and I'm happy to take any questions from the group. But thank you very, very much for your time this evening.
Yeah, thank you so much, Stephen. There's no questions in the chat at the minute. And again, there's only a few of us in here, so if anyone would like to, feel free to take your mics off and ask any questions that you've got directly to Stephen. I can see that Ryan's just typing, so I'll just hold on for a second there. Will these resources be emailed to us? What we'll do is that we'll make we'll make a copy of Stephen's presentation as a PowerPoint available on the website, which you can download. There'll also be this pre-recorded session available as well, which you'll be free to kind of download or send a link to any other colleagues in your schools or colleges that you think it would be useful to. Right, then that might. Sorry. Go on.
So I just wanted to thank everybody for the time once again, and I suppose the key messages for me would be encourage your students to apply as soon as we open, particularly if they've got care and responsibilities or they're getting some help. My lived experience with Hannah in year 13 was that the year disappeared before we knew it, and you really, with all of the open days, with offer visits, etc., getting the student finance boxed off and put away is really important, because you don't want to be the parent of a student going to university without their tuition fee confirmed or maintenance support in place, because the bank of mum and dad runs dry in Freshers Week quite quickly. And also from that experience from childcare or from disabled student allowance, getting that support in as soon as you can is really, really important. So if that's one message to take away, just ask them to apply as soon as they can.
Wonderful. So I'll close the session up there then. So a big thank you to Stephen for taking the time out to delivering the session for us. Really, really useful stuff. And we'll get all the sessions up on the website. Okay, thanks everyone.
Thanks everyone. Good evening. Take care. Bye bye now.